Pennsylvania.
Presence has found its way into their home.
8 people live in this house. What's this? 8 people are not crazy.
When did this start?
Heather's confirmation.
7th of September.
There's something.
There's an evil here. Is a demon. It's we were young. We were scared. After all these years, it wasn't done with our family.
Some cases are so dark a broken bar even the light fears to enter. This time, evil isn't hiding in a house, it's hiding in plain sight. One family's nightmare will push the Warrens to the edge of faith, the broken bar, and into a battle for their very souls. This is The Conjuring 3A, only on M Cinema Reviews. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It is a 2021 American supernatural horror film directed by Michael Chaves, with a screenplay by David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick from a story by Johnson McGoldrick and James Wan. It is a sequel to The Conjuring, 2013, and The Conjuring 2, 2016, and the 7th entry in the Conjuring universe. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga return as paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, joined by Rory O'Connor, Sir Catherine Hook in her feature film debut, and Julian Hillyard, produced by Juan and Peter Safran. The film is inspired by the 1981 Connecticut trial of R. and Cheyenne Johnson and the book The Devil in Connecticut by Gerald Brittle. Development for the third Conjuring film began in 2016, with Juan confirming he would not direct due to scheduling conflicts. Safran stated it would not follow the haunted house format of the previous entries. In June 2017, a third installment was officially announced, with Johnson hired to write the screenplay and Chaves chosen to direct after helming The Curse of La Llorona, 2019. Filming took place in Georgia in mid-2019. In 1981 Brookfield, Connecticut, demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren attend the exorcism of 8-year-old David Glatzel, witnessed by his family, David's sister Debbie, her boyfriend Aaron Johnson, and Father Gordon. During the ritual, Aaron challenges the demon to enter him instead, which Ed sees happen just before suffering a heart attack. A month later, Aaron begins experiencing terrifying visions and kills his landlord by stabbing him 22 times. His trial becomes the first U.S. murder case to claim demonic possession as defense. The Warrens discover a witch's totem in the Glatzel home, linking the curse to a satanic occultist. Former priest Castner, an expert on the disciples of the Ram cult, explains the totem's purpose. When a similar totem turns up in Massachusetts, the Warrens investigate and connect it to the murder of Kata Lincoln by her friend Jessica, who later died by suicide. Lorraine's visions revealed that the occultist tried to make Aaron kill himself, and now knows the Warrens are interfering. The curse can only be broken by destroying the occultist's altar. When a totem is found in the Warrens' own home, it falls under its influence. Castner reveals the occultist is his daughter, Isla, whom he secretly raised despite his priestly vows. Fascinated by his research into the occult, she became a satanic practitioner. Isla kills Castner and curses both Ed and Aaron, prompting them to attack Lorraine and themselves. Lorraine restores Ed's sanity by reminding him of their love, and he smashes the altar, breaking the curse. The demon kills Isla for her failure. Ed adds the altar's chalice to the Warrens' artifact room beside the Lovick painting and Annabelle doll. Aaron is convicted of manslaughter, serves 5 years in prison, and marries Debbie while incarcerated. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, 2021, a comprehensive analysis of casting choices. Introduction. The third installment of the Conjuring franchise, officially titled The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, arrived in theaters on June 4, 2021, marking a significant chapter in the horror cinema landscape. Directed by Michael Chaves, who took over from James Wan, this supernatural horror film presented audiences with a unique casting challenge, maintaining the established chemistry of the franchise's core performers while introducing new characters based on real-life individuals involved in one of the most controversial paranormal cases in American legal history. The casting of The Conjuring 3 represents more than just the selection of actors for roles. It embodies a careful balance between franchise continuity, authentic portrayal of real people, and the creation of compelling horror cinema. This comprehensive analysis examines the intricate casting decisions that shaped the film, from the return of franchise veterans to the introduction of newcomers who would breathe life into the true story of R. and Cheyenne Johnson's murder trial and the Warren family's most challenging case. The Foundation, returning franchise stars Patrick Wilson as Ed Warren. The anchor of authenticity. Patrick Wilson's return as Ed Warren in The Conjuring 3 marked his third portrayal of the real-life paranormal investigator, cementing his position as one of the franchise's most essential elements. Wilson's casting journey began with the original 2013 film, where his portrayal of the gentle, faith-driven demonologist established the emotional and spiritual foundation of the entire franchise. By the time The Conjuring 3 entered production, Wilson had evolved his interpretation of Ed Warren across multiple films, developing a nuanced understanding of the character that extended beyond the original film's requirements. His performance in the third installment demonstrates the accumulated wisdom of an actor who has spent nearly a decade inhabiting the same character, understanding not just Ed's surface characteristics but his deeper psychological motivations and spiritual convictions. The casting decision to retain Wilson was never in question during pre-production discussions. His chemistry with Vera Farmiga had become the franchise's defining element, and his ability to ground supernatural horror in emotional reality had proven indispensable. For The Conjuring 3, Wilson faced the unique challenge of portraying Ed Warren during a period of significant personal vulnerability, as the real-life investigator had suffered a heart attack that limited his involvement in the case. This physical limitation required Wilson to adjust his typically robust portrayal, showing Ed as more fragile while maintaining his spiritual strength. Wilson's approach to the role in the third film involved extensive research into the actual case files and interviews with surviving members of the Warren family. He spent considerable time understanding how the real Ed Warren's health struggles affected his investigative methods and relationship with Lorraine. This preparation allowed Wilson to deliver a performance that honored both the franchise's established characterization and the real person's experience during this challenging period. The casting director's decision to continue with Wilson also reflected the studio's recognition of his drawing power with horror audiences. His previous work in horror films like Insidious had already established him as a reliable presence in the genre, and his continued involvement in the Conjuring franchise had solidified his status as a modern horror icon. His casting represented both artistic and commercial considerations, ensuring franchise continuity while maintaining audience investment. Vera Farmiga as Lorraine Warren. The psychic heart of the franchise. Vera Farmiga's return as Lorraine Warren in The Conjuring 3 represented perhaps the most crucial casting decision for the film's success. Her portrayal of the clairvoyant investigator had become the emotional and supernatural core of the franchise, with her ability to convey psychic experiences convincingly serving as the audience's primary window into the paranormal elements of each story. Farmiga's casting journey with The Conjuring began with her extensive preparation for the original film, which included meeting with the real Lorraine Warren and studying her mannerisms, speech patterns, and investigative techniques. By the third film, this preparation had evolved into a deep, almost intuitive understanding of the character that allowed Farmiga to portray Lorraine's psychic abilities with remarkable authenticity. For The Conjuring 3, Farmiga faced the challenge of portraying Lorraine Warren during one of her most difficult cases, where her psychic abilities would be tested to their limits. The casting team recognized that Farmiga's established portrayal provided the foundation necessary for this more intense spiritual journey. Her ability to convey both the gift and burden of psychic sensitivity had been refined across two previous films, making her the only viable choice for the role. The development of Farmiga's character in the third film required her to explore new dimensions of Lorraine's abilities. The script called for more intense psychic experiences than in previous films, including dangerous spiritual possessions and life-threatening supernatural encounters. Farmiga's preparation involved consultations with psychic advisors and religious counselors to understand the psychological and spiritual toll such experiences would take on a person. Farmiga's casting also brought significant professional credibility to the production. Her Academy Award nomination for Up in the Air and her extensive television work, including her starring role in Bates Motel, demonstrated her range and ability to carry complex dramatic material. This credibility was essential for a franchise that based its appeal on the supposedly authentic experiences of real people. The chemistry between Farmiga and Wilson had become one of cinema's most compelling supernatural partnerships. Their on-screen marriage relationship provided the emotional anchor that allowed audiences to invest in the fantastic elements of the stories. The casting team's decision to reunite them for the third film recognized that this relationship had become as important to the franchise as the supernatural elements themselves. The new generation, fresh faces for a new story. Rory O'Connor as Arne Cheyenne Johnson, the possessed defendant. The casting of Rory O'Connor as Arne Cheyenne Johnson represented one of the most crucial decisions for The Conjuring 3. As the young Irish actor would be portraying the real-life individual at the center of the first murder case in American legal history where demonic possession was used as a defense. O'Connor's selection demonstrated the casting team's commitment to finding an actor capable of conveying both the ordinary humanity and extraordinary circumstances of Johnson's story. O'Connor, primarily known for his work in period dramas like The Spanish Princess and Hans Devil, brought a combination of vulnerability and intensity that made him ideal for the role. His previous work had demonstrated his ability to portray characters caught between conflicting forces, whether social, political, or personal. This experience proved invaluable for portraying someone allegedly caught between the human and supernatural worlds. The casting process for Aaron Johnson required finding an actor who could convincingly portray both the loving boyfriend and the allegedly possessed individual who committed murder. O'Connor's audition reportedly focused heavily on his ability to transition between these states, demonstrating the gradual psychological and spiritual transformation that the script demanded. His Irish background actually worked in his favor, as it provided him with a slight outsider's perspective that mirrored Johnson's position as someone experiencing inexplicable phenomena. O'Connor's preparation for the role involved extensive research into the actual case, including court transcripts, police reports, and interviews with surviving witnesses. He also worked with acting coaches specializing in psychological drama to understand how to portray someone experiencing a complete loss of personal agency. This preparation was essential for creating a performance that respected both the real person and the dramatic requirements of the film. The physical demands of the role were considerable, as O'Connor needed to convincingly portray various stages of alleged possession, from subtle behavioral changes to violent outbursts. His background in physical theater and stage combat proved valuable for these sequences, allowing him to create disturbing possession scenes while maintaining the safety of other cast members. O'Connor's casting also represented the franchise's commitment to international talent, reflecting the global appeal of the Conjuring series. His relative newcomer status in American cinema allowed audiences to see him primarily as the character rather than bringing expectations from previous roles, which was particularly important for a story based on real events. Sarah Catherine Hook as Debbie Glatzel, a feature film debut. The selection of Sarah Catherine Hook to portray Debbie Glatzel marked a significant moment both for the actress and the franchise, as it represented her feature film debut in a major studio horror production. Hook's casting as Aaron Johnson's girlfriend demonstrated the filmmakers' willingness to take risks with relatively unknown talent when they found the right combination of skill and screen presence. Hook's background in television, including appearances on shows like Law Order, Special Victims Unit, had provided her with experience in dramatic material, but Conjuring 3 required her to navigate the specific challenges of supernatural horror while portraying a real person who had experienced genuine trauma. Her audition process reportedly focused heavily on her chemistry with Rory O'Connor, as the relationship formed the emotional foundation for the film's central tragedy. The casting team's decision to choose Hook over more established actresses reflected their commitment to finding someone who could bring freshness to the franchise while maintaining the authentic, grounded approach that had made the series successful. Hook's relative inexperience in film actually worked in her favor, as it allowed her to approach the role without preconceived notions about horror film acting conventions. Hook's preparation involved meeting with members of the Glatzel family who were willing to share their memories of the events depicted in the film. This research provided her with insights into Debbie's personality, speech patterns, and emotional responses that went beyond what was available in public records. The actress spent considerable time understanding how someone would cope with having their younger brother allegedly possessed and their boyfriend accused of murder. The role required Hook to portray a wide range of emotions, from the joy of young love to the terror of supernatural experiences and the heartbreak of legal proceedings. Her performance needed to serve as the audience's emotional guide through increasingly disturbing events, making her casting crucial to the film's success. The casting team recognized that Hook possessed the natural empathy and emotional availability necessary for this demanding role. Hook's casting also reflected the franchise's commitment to gender-balanced storytelling, ensuring that female characters had agency and depth beyond their relationships with male protagonists. Her portrayal of Debbie Glatzel needed to show strength and resilience while acknowledging the genuine vulnerability of someone caught in extraordinary circumstances. Julian Hillyard as David Glatzel, young talent and a crucial role. The casting of Julian Hillyard as David Glatzel, the young boy at the center of the alleged possession that led to the film's tragic events, required finding a child actor capable of handling extremely challenging material while working within the strict guidelines that govern young performers in horror productions. Hillyard's previous work in supernatural productions like The Haunting of Hill House and WandaVision made him an ideal choice for this demanding role. Hillyard's experience with supernatural and horror elements was crucial for The Conjuring 3, as his character's alleged possession experiences form the foundation for all subsequent events in the story. His work in Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House had already demonstrated his ability to convey fear and supernatural experiences convincingly, while his role as Billy Maximoff in WandaVision showed his capacity for portraying characters with unusual abilities or circumstances. The casting process for David Glatzel required special consideration due to the character's age and the intense nature of the material. Child welfare advocates and specialized coaches were involved in ensuring that any young actor cast in the role would be protected throughout production while still delivering an effective performance. Hillyard's professional experience and the support systems already in place around him made him a safe and reliable choice. Hillyard's preparation for the role involved working with child psychologists and religious advisors to understand how a young person might process and respond to the experiences depicted in the film. This preparation was conducted with careful attention to maintaining appropriate boundaries and ensuring that the young actor's emotional well-being was protected throughout the process. The physical demands of portraying alleged possession scenes required specialized choreography and safety measures. Hillyard worked with stunt coordinators and child welfare specialists to create convincing possession sequences that prioritized his safety while achieving the dramatic impact necessary for the film's horror elements. Hillyard's casting also demonstrated the franchise's commitment to working with established young talent rather than exploiting child actors for shock value. His professional experience and the protective system surrounding his work ensured that his performance could be achieved ethically while maintaining the film's horror credentials. Supporting cast: building a community of belief. Charlene Amoya as Judy Warren, expanding the Warren family dynamic. The casting of Charlene Amoya as Judy Warren, the daughter of Ed and Lorraine Warren, represented an interesting challenge for the filmmakers, as previous Conjuring films had established the character as much younger. Amoya's casting reflected the decision to age up the character to better serve the story's dramatic needs while maintaining continuity with the established franchise mythology. Amoya's extensive experience in both comedy and drama, including her work on How I Met Your Mother and Birds of Prey, provided her with the versatility necessary to navigate the tonal complexities of The Conjuring 3. Her ability to balance humor with genuine emotion made her ideal for portraying a character who serves as both comic relief and emotional stakes for her parents' dangerous work. The casting decision to include Judy Warren more prominently in the third film reflected the franchise's evolution toward exploring the personal costs of the Warrens' work. Amoya's portrayal needed to show someone who had grown up surrounded by supernatural dangers while maintaining her own identity and concerns. This required an actress capable of conveying both familiarity with the paranormal and genuine human concerns about her parents' safety. Amoya's preparation involved studying the real Judy Warren's public appearances and interviews to understand her personality and relationship with her famous parents. This research helped her create a portrayal that honored the real person while serving the dramatic needs of the film. Her performance needed to provide grounding for the franchise's supernatural elements while adding new emotional dimensions to the Warren family dynamic. John Noble as Castner, veteran talent brings gravitas. The casting of John Noble as Castner, a former priest turned occult expert, brought significant dramatic weight to The Conjuring 3. Noble's extensive experience in genre television, particularly his work on Fringe and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, provided him with the gravitas necessary to portray a character who bridges the gaps between religious faith and paranormal investigation. Noble's casting reflected the filmmaker's desire to add layers of complexity to the film's exploration of faith and supernatural phenomena. His character serves as both ally and cautionary tale for the Warrens, representing someone who has delved too deeply into occult knowledge and paid a personal price. This required an actor capable of conveying both wisdom and tragic experience. The preparation for Noble's role involved research into both Catholic theology and occult practices, as his character needed to speak knowledgeably about both subjects. Noble's theatrical background provided him with the skills necessary to deliver exposition-heavy dialogue in a way that felt natural and compelling rather than purely informational. Noble's casting also demonstrated the franchise's commitment to attracting respected character actors who could elevate the material beyond typical horror film conventions. His presence added credibility to the film's more esoteric elements while providing a connection to the broader genre traditions that influenced the Conjuring series. Eugenie Bondurant as the occultist, creating a memorable antagonist. The casting of Eugenie Bondurant as the occultist, the film's primary human antagonist, required finding an actress capable of creating a memorable villain while working within the constraints of a character based on real allegations rather than clearly established facts. Bondurant's background in both dramatic and horror productions made her ideal for this complex role. Bondurant's previous work in productions like The Hunger Games series and various horror films had demonstrated her ability to create compelling antagonistic characters who maintain human depth even while performing terrible acts. This experience was crucial for The Conjuring 3, as the occultist needed to be genuinely threatening while avoiding cartoonish villainy. The casting process for the occultist required special sensitivity due to the fact that the character was based on allegations made during a real murder investigation. Bondurant's performance needed to create genuine menace while respecting the legal and ethical complexities surrounding the actual case. This required an actress with the maturity and professional judgment to navigate these sensitive areas. Bondurant's preparation involved research into both historical witch trial accounts and modern occult practices, as her character draws on both traditional and contemporary supernatural traditions. This research helped her create a performance that felt authentically grounded in occult tradition while serving the film's dramatic needs. The casting director's vision, bringing real people to life. The casting of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It presented unique challenges that extended far beyond typical horror film casting decisions. Unlike fictional horror characters, the people portrayed in this film were real individuals who had experienced genuine trauma, legal proceedings, and public scrutiny. This reality added layers of responsibility and complexity to every casting choice. The film's casting director needed to balance multiple considerations, honoring the real people being portrayed, serving the dramatic needs of the script, maintaining franchise continuity, and creating effective horror cinema. This balance required careful attention to both the personal histories of the real individuals and the storytelling requirements of the film medium. One of the most significant challenges involved portraying the Glatzel family, whose experiences with alleged supernatural phenomena had divided their own family members and led to legal disputes that continued long after the original events. The casting team needed to find actors who could portray those individuals with empathy and respect while acknowledging that different family members had conflicting recollections of the same events. The legal implications of the casting decisions also required careful consideration, since some of the individuals portrayed in the film are still alive, and since the events depicted remained subjects of dispute. The casting team worked closely with legal advisors to ensure that all portrayals remained within appropriate boundaries. This involved ongoing consultation with attorneys throughout the casting and production process. The casting decisions also needed to account for the cultural and regional specificity of the Connecticut setting. The filmmakers sought actors who could authentically portray the working-class Catholic community where the events occurred, ensuring that the performances felt rooted in a specific time and place rather than generic horror movie conventions. Chemistry and ensemble building. The Warren partnership, sustaining franchise chemistry. The continued success of the Conjuring franchise depended heavily on the chemistry between Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as Ed and Lorraine Warren. By the time of the third film, this on-screen partnership had evolved into one of horror cinema's most reliable and compelling relationships. The casting team's decision to reunite these actors reflected not just audience expectations but the recognition that their dynamic had become integral to the franchise's identity. The development of Wilson and Farmiga's characters across 3 films had created a depth and authenticity that would have been difficult to replicate with new actors. Their understanding of each other's acting styles and their shared history with these characters allowed them to create performances that felt lived in and genuine. This established chemistry provided a stable foundation that allowed the new cast members to integrate smoothly into the franchise's established world. The casting team recognized that the Wilson-Farmiga partnership served as more than just romantic chemistry. It represented the spiritual and emotional core of the entire Conjuring universe. Their portrayal of a marriage strengthened by shared supernatural experiences provided audiences with an anchor of stability amidst the chaos of paranormal horror. This dynamic was particularly important for The Conjuring 3, as the film's focus on a young couple's relationship needed this established partnership as a point of comparison and hope. Integrating new characters, building believable relationships. The success of The Conjuring 3's casting depended not just on individual performances but on the believable integration of new characters into the established world. The casting team needed to ensure that newcomers like Rory O'Connor and Sarah Catherine Hook could create convincing relationships both with each other and with the established Warren characters. The chemistry between O'Connor and Hook as Arn and Debbie needed to feel authentic and compelling, as the relationship formed the emotional heart of the new story. The casting team conducted extensive chemistry tests to ensure that these relatively unknown actors could create a believable romantic partnership that would sustain audience interest throughout increasingly disturbing circumstances. The integration of the new cast with the established Wilson-Farmiga partnership required careful attention to performance styles and acting approaches. The new actors needed to adapt to the grounded, naturalistic approach that had become the franchise's signature while bringing their own authentic energy to their roles. This balance was achieved through extensive rehearsal periods and character development work that allowed all the actors to find common ground in their approach to the material. The director's influence on casting choices. Michael Chaves' appointment as director of The Conjuring 3 brought a fresh perspective to the franchise's casting approach. Having previously directed The Curse of La Llorona, Chaves understood the specific challenges of supernatural horror casting while bringing his own vision to the established Conjuring world. Chaves' casting philosophy emphasized authenticity and emotional truth over conventional horror movie archetypes. His work with the casting team focused on finding actors who could ground supernatural experiences in recognizable human emotions. This approach was particularly important for The Conjuring 3, as the film's foundation in real events required performances that felt genuinely human rather than stylized or theatrical. The director's influence was particularly evident in the casting of the younger actors. Chaves' experience with child performers in horror contexts helped ensure that Julian Hillyard's casting as David Glatzel would prioritize both performance quality and child welfare. His approach to working with young actors emphasized protection and support while still achieving the dramatic intensity necessary for effective horror cinema. Chaves also brought a multicultural perspective to the casting process, reflected in choices like Rory O'Connor's selection despite his Irish background for an American role. The director's openness to international talent helped expand the franchise's global appeal while maintaining its essential American character. The challenges of true crime casting. Casting The Conjuring 3 involved navigating the complex ethical and legal landscape of true crime entertainment. Unlike fictional horror characters, the individuals portrayed in the film were real people whose experiences had been documented in court records, police reports, and media coverage. This reality added significant responsibilities to the casting process. The casting team needed to balance respect for the real individuals with the dramatic requirements of horror cinema. This involved extensive research into the personalities, appearances, and mannerisms of the actual people involved in the Arn Johnson case. However, this research had to be conducted sensitively, recognizing that some family members had conflicting memories of events and that the case remained controversial. Legal considerations also influenced casting decisions, since some of the individuals portrayed were still alive, and since aspects of the case remained subjects of dispute. The casting team worked closely with attorneys to ensure that all portrayals remained within appropriate legal boundaries. This involved ongoing consultation throughout the casting and production process. The casting decisions also needed to account for the passage of time since the original events. The real Arn Johnson case occurred in 1981, meaning that the individuals involved were now decades older than during the events depicted in the film. The casting team needed to find actors who could convincingly portray those individuals as they were 40 years ago while being respectful of who they had become. Cultural and regional authenticity. The Connecticut setting of The Conjuring 3 required casting decisions that could authentically represent the specific cultural and regional context of the original events. The filmmakers sought to avoid generic small-town America stereotypes in favor of performances that felt genuinely rooted in the working-class Catholic community where the events occurred. This regional authenticity extended beyond accent and dialect to encompass cultural attitudes, social dynamics, and religious beliefs that were specific to the time and place of the original events. The casting team worked with dialect coaches and cultural consultants to ensure that all performances felt appropriate to the 1981 Connecticut setting. The religious aspects of the story required particular attention to cultural authenticity. The Catholic faith of the individuals involved was not merely background detail but central to their understanding and response to the events they experienced. The casting team needed actors who could portray this religious devotion authentically without caricature or condescension. The working-class economic background of most of the individuals involved also required authentic representation. The casting choices needed to reflect the genuine economic circumstances of the real people while avoiding stereotypical portrayals of working-class life. This required actors who could embody these characters' dignity and complexity regardless of their economic circumstances. The impact of franchise expectations. By the time of The Conjuring 3's production, the franchise had established significant audience expectations that influenced every casting decision. Fans expected certain levels of performance quality, character development, and supernatural authenticity that had been established in previous films. These expectations created both opportunities and constraints for the casting team. The return of Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga was essentially mandated by audience expectations, as their portrayals of Ed and Lorraine Warren had become synonymous with the franchise itself. However, this continuity also provided a foundation that allowed the casting team to take risks with newer characters and lesser-known actors. The franchise's reputation for quality horror entertainment also attracted higher-caliber actors than might typically be available for supernatural horror films. The success of previous Conjuring films had elevated the franchise's profile within the industry, making it easier to attract respected performers like John Noble who might not ordinarily consider horror projects. The established visual and performance style of the franchise also influenced casting decisions. New actors needed to fit seamlessly into the naturalistic, grounded approach that had become the series' signature. This requirement eliminated more theatrical or stylized performers in favor of actors who could maintain the franchise's commitment to believable supernatural experiences. International appeal and global casting considerations. The global success of the Conjuring franchise influenced casting decisions for the third film, as the filmmakers needed to consider international audience expectations and market appeal. While the story remained fundamentally American, the casting choices needed to have sufficient international recognition and appeal to sustain the franchise's worldwide success. The selection of Irish actor Rory O'Connor as Arn Johnson reflected this international approach, bringing European talent to an American story in a way that expanded the film's global appeal without compromising its essential character. This choice demonstrated the franchise's evolution toward a more international perspective while maintaining its American identity. The casting decisions also needed to account for different cultural approaches to supernatural and religious themes. What worked for American audiences might not translate effectively to international markets, requiring a balance between cultural specificity and universal human experiences. The casting team sought actors who could embody universally recognizable emotions and relationships while maintaining the story's specific cultural context. Technical considerations in horror casting. The specific demands of supernatural horror filmmaking influenced many casting decisions for The Conjuring 3. Actors needed not only dramatic skills but also the physical and psychological resilience necessary for intensive horror production techniques. This included extended night shoots, complex practical effects work, and emotionally demanding supernatural sequences. The possession scenes required actors capable of extreme physical and emotional expression while maintaining safety standards and professional conduct. This eliminated many actors who might excel in dramatic roles but lacked the specific skills necessary for horror performance. The casting team needed performers who could convincingly portray supernatural experiences without compromising their own well-being or that of other cast members. The technical aspects of creating convincing supernatural horror also influenced casting decisions. Actors needed to be comfortable working with elaborate makeup effects, practical special effects, and green screen technology. Some dramatic actors who might be perfect for the emotional aspects of their roles proved unsuitable for the technical demands of horror filmmaking. The collaborative nature of horror filmmaking, where actors often need to support each other through challenging and sometimes disturbing material, also influenced casting choices. The team sought performers who demonstrated not only individual talent but also the collaborative spirit and emotional maturity necessary for intensive horror production. The evolution of horror casting standards. The Conjuring 3's casting decisions reflected broader changes in horror film casting standards, moving away from exploitative approaches toward more respectful and professional practices. This evolution was particularly evident in the treatment of young performers and in the portrayal of real-life trauma survivors. The casting of Julian Hillyard as David Glatzel exemplified these improved standards, with extensive child welfare protections, professional support systems, and age-appropriate modifications to potentially disturbing material. This approach demonstrated the franchise's commitment to ethical filmmaking practices while maintaining effective horror content. The portrayal of trauma survivors also reflected evolved industry standards, with casting choices that emphasized dignity and respect rather than exploitation. The actors chosen to portray the real individuals involved in the Aaron Johnson case were selected partly based on their ability to bring empathy and understanding to their roles rather than simply creating shocking or disturbing content. These elevated casting standards also reflected the franchise's maturity and success, allowing it to attract higher quality talent and maintain more professional production standards than might be typical for horror films. This approach ultimately benefited both the artistic quality of the film and its commercial appeal. Conclusion: the art and science of supernatural casting. The casting of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It represents a complex intersection of artistic vision, commercial considerations, ethical responsibilities, and technical requirements that extends far beyond typical film casting decisions. The success of these choices ultimately determine not only the film's individual success but also the continued viability of the entire Conjuring franchise. The decision to retain Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as Ed and Lorraine Warren provided essential continuity while allowing new talent like Rory O'Connor and Sarah Catherine Hook to bring fresh energy to the established world. This balance between continuity and innovation reflected the broader challenges facing any successful film franchise: how to honor audience expectations while continuing to evolve and surprise. The casting team's commitment to authenticity, both in terms of honoring real people and maintaining the franchise's established tone, demonstrated the elevated standards that successful horror franchises must maintain. The integration of respected character actors like John Noble with rising talents like Julian Hillyard created a cast that could serve both the film's immediate dramatic needs and its broader franchise responsibilities. Perhaps most importantly, the casting of The Conjuring 3 demonstrated how horror films could address real-world events and genuine human experiences with respect and dignity while still delivering effective supernatural entertainment. The balance achieved between honoring the real individuals involved and creating compelling cinema established a model for how true crime horror could be produced ethically and effectively. The ultimate success of The Conjuring 3's casting choices can be measured not only in box office returns and critical reception but in the film's ability to continue the franchise's tradition of grounding supernatural horror in recognizable human emotions and relationships. By finding actors who could authentically embody both ordinary people and extraordinary circumstances, the casting team created a film that honored its real-life subjects while delivering the supernatural thrills that audiences expected from the Conjuring franchise. As the Conjuring universe continues to expand with future installments, the casting decisions made for The Devil Made Me Do It will likely influence how the franchise approaches similar challenges in future films. The successful integration of new talent with established stars, the respectful portrayal of real individuals, and the maintenance of the series' signature authenticity all provide valuable lessons for future supernatural horror productions. The casting of The Conjuring 3 ultimately represents more than just the selection of actors for roles. It embodies a sophisticated understanding of how supernatural horror can engage with real-world events while maintaining the artistic integrity and commercial viability necessary for continued franchise success. In achieving this balance, the film's casting choices contributed to the ongoing evolution of horror cinema as a legitimate and respected form of entertainment that can address serious themes while delivering the thrills and excitement that define the genre. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, 2021, a comprehensive analysis introduction. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It stands as the third installment in the mainline Conjuring series and the seventh film in the Conjuring universe, representing both a continuation and evolution of one of modern horror cinema's most successful franchises. Directed by Michael Chaves and featuring the return of Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, this 2021 supernatural horror film marked a significant departure from the traditional haunted house formula that had defined its predecessors. Based on the infamous trial of Cheyenne Johnson, the first American murder case where demonic possession was claimed as a defense, the film expanded the series' scope beyond domestic horror to encompass elements of supernatural thriller, courtroom drama, and investigative mystery. This ambitious narrative approach, combined with the unprecedented challenges of pandemic-era filmmaking and distribution, created a unique entry in the franchise that would test both the creative team's adaptability and audience's continued investment in the Warren mythology. Production development and pre-production. The genesis of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It can be traced back to 2016, when the success of The Conjuring 2 naturally led to discussions about continuing the franchise. James Wan stated, "There could be many more Conjuring movies because the Warrens have so many stories." This optimistic assessment reflected the wealth of material available from the real-life case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren, but it also masked significant creative and logistical challenges that would shape the film's development over the subsequent years. The initial development process was complicated by James Wan's increasingly busy schedule with other high-profile projects, particularly his work on DC's Aquaman franchise. Wan stated that he may have been unable to direct the film due to his commitments to other projects. This scheduling conflict created both an opportunity and a challenge for the franchise. While it necessitated finding a new director, it also allowed for fresh creative perspectives that could potentially revitalize the series. He told Collider, "Assuming we are lucky enough to have a third chapter, there are other filmmakers that I would love to sort of continue on the Conjuring world, if we are lucky enough." This statement demonstrated Wan's understanding that successful franchises require both continuity and evolution, setting the stage for the creative transition that would define the third film's development. The creative team's ambitions for the third installment were evident in early conceptual discussions. Wan also noted that, if a third film were to be made, it would ideally take place in the 1980s. This temporal progression would allow the film to explore a different historical period while maintaining the period authenticity that had been crucial to the franchise's atmospheric effectiveness. More intriguingly, Wan later stated that the sequel could include lycanthropy. "Maybe we can go and do it like a classic American werewolf in London style." The Warrens set against the backdrop of The Hound of Baskerville. While these werewolf elements never materialized in this final film, they indicated the creative team's willingness to push the franchise into new supernatural territories. This experimental approach would eventually manifest in the film's focus on witchcraft and demonic possession rather than traditional haunting, representing a significant departure from the established formula. Producer Peter Safran played a crucial role in defining the film's direction during the early development phase. In May 2017, Safran said it would be unlikely that a third installment would be a haunted house film. This strategic decision proved pivotal in shaping the film's eventual narrative structure, moving away from the claustrophobic domestic settings that had defined the first two entries toward a more expansive, investigation-oriented approach. The official announcement of the third film's development came in June 2017. In June 2017, it was announced a third installment was in development, with The Conjuring 2 co-writer David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick hired to write the screenplay. Johnson McGoldrick's involvement provided essential continuity with the franchise's established tone and character dynamics while bringing the creative flexibility necessary to adapt the ambitious new storyline. The script development process proceeded methodically, with Wan emphasizing quality over speed. In August 2017, Wan told Entertainment Weekly that the filmmakers had been working hard on The Conjuring 3, and that we're in the midst of working on the script, and still hashing it out. We want to make sure that the script is in a really good place, with how much people have loved the first two Conjuring films. I don't want to rush into the third one if possible. This careful approach reflected the pressure inherent in continuing a beloved franchise while attempting to bring something new and worthy to audiences. By September of the following year, producer Peter Safran stated that the script was near completion and that production would begin sometime during 2019. This timeline proved accurate, though the intervening months would bring significant changes to the project's creative leadership. In May 2019, it was revealed that James Wan co-wrote the story with David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick. The most significant development occurred in October 2018 with the directorial transition. In October 2018, it was announced that Conjuring 3 would not be directed by Wan but instead would be directed by the Curse of La Llorona director Michael Chaves. This change represented a crucial moment for the franchise, as Wan's distinctive directorial style had been instrumental in establishing the visual language and atmospheric approach that defined the series. Wan indicated that he had been impressed while working with Chaves on The Curse of La Llorona, stating, "I got to know him as a filmmaker. Chaves' ability to bring emotion to a story, and his understanding of mood and scares, make him a perfect fit to direct the next Conjuring film." This endorsement proved crucial in maintaining both studio confidence and fan acceptance of the directorial transition. The film's thematic focus began to crystallize during late 2018. In December 2018, Wan confirmed the film's plot details. Wan spoke with Bloody Disgusting, saying, "I think it's the first time in America's history where the defendant used possessions as a reason, as an excuse." This historical angle provided the film with a compelling real-world foundation that differentiated it from the more straightforward supernatural scenarios of its predecessors. Musical continuity was secured in October 2019 with the confirmation of Joseph Bishara's return. In October 2019, Joseph Bishara, who composed the scores for The Conjuring, Annabelle, The Conjuring 2, The Curse of La Llorona and Annabelle Comes Home, was confirmed to be returning to score this third Conjuring film. Bishara's involvement ensured that the film would maintain the distinctive musical identity that had become synonymous with the Conjuring universe. In December 2019, the film's official title, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, was revealed. This title effectively communicated both the film's connection to the Johnson case and its thematic focus on demonic possession, preparing audiences for the tonal and structural shifts that would distinguish this entry from its predecessors. The casting process represented both continuity and evolution for the franchise. In December 2018, it was confirmed that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga would reprise their roles as Ed and Lorraine Warren, respectively, from The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2. Their return was essential for maintaining the emotional core of the franchise and ensuring audience connection to the established mythology. New cast members were gradually revealed throughout 2019. In August 2019, actress Megan Ashley Brown announced that she and Mitchell Hugh would portray young Lorraine and Ed Warren respectively. This casting decision indicated that the film would explore the characters' backstory and relationship origins, adding another layer of character development to the supernatural proceedings. In December 2019, Sterling Gerrans, Julian Hillyard, Sir Catherine Hook and Rory O'Connor were all confirmed as part of the film's cast by Chaves. These casting announcements revealed the film's focus on younger characters and suggested a coming-of-age element that would complement the supernatural thriller aspects. Filming began on June 3, 2019, in Atlanta, Georgia. The choice of Georgia as the primary filming location reflected both economic considerations of the state's attractive tax incentives for film production set and practical logistics, as Georgia had developed significant infrastructure to support major motion picture projects. The location also provided the production team with diverse environments that could convincingly represent various New England settings crucial to the story. The Atlanta filming location offered significant advantages for a period horror film requiring authentic 1980s atmosphere. Georgia's varied architecture and landscapes provided the flexibility needed to create believable Connecticut and Massachusetts locations while maintaining production efficiency. The state's film-friendly policies and experienced crew base had made it an increasingly popular destination for major studio productions, ensuring access to the technical expertise necessary for a complex supernatural horror film. Director Michael Chaves approached the filming process with careful attention to maintaining continuity with the established Conjuring aesthetic while incorporating his own directorial vision. Having worked closely with James Wan on The Curse of La Llorona, Chaves understood the visual language and pacing that had made the earlier films effective. However, he also recognized the need to adapt these elements to serve the new film's expanded scope and different narrative structure. The production design team faced the challenge of creating authentic 1980s period details while maintaining the timeless, atmospheric quality that had characterized the earlier films. This temporal specificity required extensive attention to costume design, set decoration, and prop selection that would ground the supernatural elements in a recognizable historical context without overwhelming the horror atmosphere with period nostalgia. On August 15, 2019, Farmiga announced that she had finished filming her scenes. This announcement suggested that the core dramatic material involving the Warren characters had been successfully captured during the primary shooting period. However, this initial completion of principal photography would prove to be only the first phase of what would become an extended and complex production process. The filming process incorporated both traditional practical effects and modern digital techniques to realize the film's supernatural elements. The Conjuring films had always emphasized practical effects and on-set atmosphere creation over extensive post-production digital work, and this approach continued with a third installment. However, the film's more ambitious supernatural concepts, including the demonic possession sequences and otherworldly visions, required careful coordination between practical and digital elements. Cinematographer Michael Burgess worked closely with Chaves to develop a visual approach that would serve both the film's investigative thriller elements and its traditional horror sequences. The film's structure, which moved between multiple locations and incorporated elements of police procedural alongside supernatural horror, demanded a more varied visual palette than the claustrophobic domestic settings of the earlier entries. Additional photography was initially scheduled for April 2020 but was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This delay would prove significant, as it not only extended the production timeline but also provided additional time for creative refinement that would substantially alter aspects of the film's supernatural mythology and character relationships. The pandemic's impact on the film industry created unprecedented challenges for productions worldwide, and The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It was among countless projects forced to adapt to new safety protocols and scheduling uncertainties. The delay in additional photography meant that the film's completion would be pushed back significantly, affecting both the release strategy and the competitive landscape the film would eventually enter. When filming eventually resumed for additional photography, director Michael Chaves took advantage of the extended development time to make significant creative adjustments. During reshoots, Chaves opted to remove a demonic antagonist, played by Dave Osborne. The character was supposed to be working with the occultist, but Chaves believed it just wasn't quite connecting, and instead gave Osborne a role as an infirmary patient. This creative decision demonstrated the organic nature of horror filmmaking, where the effectiveness of supernatural elements can be difficult to predict until they're fully assembled with visual effects, sound design, and editing. The ability to make such substantial creative adjustments during reshoots speaks to both the collaborative relationships between Chaves and producers Wan and Safran, and the studio's commitment to ensuring the film's creative success. John Noble's role was also expanded upon during reshoots. Noble, known for his work in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the television series Fringe, brought considerable dramatic weight to his role as Castner, the former priest with crucial connections to the film's supernatural antagonist. The decision to expand his character's presence suggests that his performance was particularly effective in early cuts and that his expanded role would enhance the film's dramatic and supernatural elements. These production changes highlight the iterative nature of contemporary filmmaking, particularly within the horror genre where the effectiveness of scares and supernatural elements can be difficult to evaluate until the full cinematic experience is assembled. The extended post-production period, while initially caused by external circumstances, ultimately provided opportunities for creative refinement that might not have been possible under a more traditional production schedule. Post-production. The post-production phase of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, proved as complex and significant as the filming process itself, involving extensive work in editing, visual effects, sound design, and musical composition. This phase was further complicated by the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the film industry, affecting everything from editing schedules to release strategies and forcing creative teams to adapt their working methods to unprecedented circumstances. Editor Christian Wagner brought considerable experience to the project, having previously worked on multiple entries in the Conjuring universe. Wagner's familiarity with the franchise's specific requirements, including the precise timing needed for effective supernatural scares and the pacing necessary to maintain psychological tension, proved invaluable as the team worked to assemble the film's various elements into a coherent and compelling narrative structure. The editing process was significantly impacted by the creative decisions made during reshoots, particularly the removal of Davis Asburn's demonic character and the expansion of John Noble's role as Castner. These changes required substantial restructuring of the film's supernatural threat hierarchy and character relationships, demanding careful attention to narrative coherence and pacing that would maintain audience engagement while serving the revised supernatural mythology. Wagner's editing had to seamlessly integrate new material shot during reshoots with the original principal photography, ensuring that the film's overall dramatic arc and supernatural logic remained intact despite the substantial creative alterations. This process required not only technical skill but also deep understanding of horror film pacing and the specific atmospheric requirements that had made the earlier Conjuring films effective. One of the most complex aspects of post-production involved the integration and refinement of the film's visual effects. Unlike the first two Conjuring films, which had relied heavily on practical effects and subtle digital enhancement, The Devil Made Me Do It required more extensive visual effects work to realize its broader supernatural concepts and more ambitious otherworldly sequences. The visual effects team faced the challenge of creating supernatural elements that would feel consistent with the established Conjuring aesthetic while supporting the film's expanded supernatural scope. This included work on the demon that possesses first David Glatzel and later Aaron Johnson, the various supernatural visions experienced by Lorraine Warren, and the climactic sequences involving the occultist's underground altar and the supernatural confrontation that resolves the film's central conflict. The digital effects work had to maintain the franchise's commitment to believable, grounded supernatural elements while expanding into new visual territory that would serve the film's more complex supernatural mythology. This balance between spectacle and authenticity required careful coordination between the visual effects team and the film's other creative departments, ensuring that the digital elements would enhance rather than overwhelm the practical performances and atmospheric elements. Sound design represented another crucial element of post-production, particularly given the importance of audio in creating effective supernatural horror atmosphere. The Conjuring films had established a distinctive approach to supernatural audio, from subtle environmental sounds that suggest otherworldly presence to more dramatic audio cues that accompany major supernatural events. The sound team needed to maintain this established audio language while adapting it to serve the film's expanded scope and different narrative structure. The film's broader geographic scope and investigative thriller elements required a more varied sound design palette than the claustrophobic domestic settings of the earlier entries. The sound team had to create audio environments that would effectively support courtroom scenes, police investigations, and multiple supernatural locations while maintaining the cohesive atmospheric approach that had become synonymous with the Conjuring universe. The COVID-19 pandemic significantly impacted post-production workflows, requiring adaptations to traditional collaborative methods and communication practices. Remote collaboration became necessary for many aspects of the process, from editorial sessions to visual effects review and sound mixing. Despite these challenges, the post-production team successfully maintained the quality standards expected of a major franchise release while adapting to unprecedented working conditions. Color grading and final image processing played important roles in establishing the film's visual identity and period authenticity. The 1980s setting required careful attention to color palettes and visual tones that would evoke the historical period without becoming distractingly stylized. The post-production team worked to create a visual approach that would feel both period-appropriate and consistent with the established Conjuring aesthetic, balancing historical authenticity with franchise continuity. The extended post-production timeline, while initially caused by external circumstances, ultimately provided opportunities for creative refinement that enhanced the film's overall quality. The additional time allowed for more thorough consideration of pacing, supernatural elements, and character development, factors that are crucial to the success of horror films and particularly important for a franchise installment that needed to both satisfy existing fans and potentially attract new audiences. Music. Joseph Bishara's return as composer for The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It represented a crucial element of continuity for the franchise, ensuring that the film's musical landscape would maintain consistency with the established sonic identity of the Conjuring universe. Joseph Bishara, who composed the scores for The Conjuring, Annabelle, The Conjuring 2, The Curse of La Llorona and Annabelle Comes Home, was confirmed to be returning to score this third Conjuring film. This extensive involvement made Bishara perhaps the most consistent creative contributor to the franchise's overall sound and atmospheric approach. Bishara's distinctive approach to horror film scoring had become integral to the Conjuring universe's identity. His work emphasized psychological tension and supernatural dread rather than traditional orchestral bombast, relying heavily on atonal harmonies, unconventional instrumentation, and carefully crafted periods of silence to create an pervasive sense of unease and otherworldly presence. This compositional philosophy proved particularly effective for the Conjuring franchise's emphasis on slow-building tension and psychological horror rather than simple shock tactics. For The Devil Made Me Do It, Bishara faced unique challenges in adapting his established musical approach to serve a significantly different narrative structure. While the first two Conjuring films had been primarily set within single locations of the parent family farmhouse and the on-field house respectively, the third film required music that could support a more expansive, investigation-oriented story that moved between multiple locations and incorporated elements of supernatural thriller alongside traditional horror elements. The composer's work needed to reflect the film's 1980s setting while maintaining the timeless, otherworldly quality that had characterized his earlier Conjuring scores. This temporal consideration required careful balancing, as overly specific period musical references might have undermined the supernatural atmosphere, while ignoring the historical context entirely could have created a disconnect between the music and the film's carefully researched period authenticity. Bishara's score incorporates several distinct musical themes and motifs designed to support the various narrative elements and character relationships that define the film. The love theme for Ed and Lorraine Warren builds upon musical ideas established in the earlier films while expanding to reflect the couple's deepening relationship and their shared commitment to their supernatural calling. This musical continuity helps maintain audience connection to these beloved characters while supporting the film's exploration of their relationship dynamics under extreme supernatural pressure. The supernatural threat material in Bishara's score required particular innovation, as the film's demonic possession and satanic curse elements demanded different musical treatment than the ghostly hauntings of the earlier entries. The composer created new thematic material that could effectively represent the more active, relevant supernatural forces at work in the story while maintaining the psychological complexity and atmospheric subtlety that had made his earlier Conjuring work so effective. One of the most challenging aspects of scoring the film involved supporting the legal drama and investigative elements that distinguished this entry from its predecessors. Bashar needed to create musical material that could maintain supernatural tension during courtroom scenes and police investigations, ensuring that these more mundane dramatic moments remain connected to the film's overall supernatural narrative and atmospheric goals. The score also needed to support the film's expanded cast of characters, particularly the young lovers Arn Johnson and Debbie Glatzel, whose relationship forms the emotional heart of the story. Bashar crafted musical themes that could represent their love and commitment while also reflecting the supernatural forces that threatened to tear them apart. This required a more overtly romantic musical approach than had been necessary in the earlier, family-focused entries. Bashar's orchestration choices for the film reflect both continuity with his earlier work and adaptation to the new story's requirements. His characteristic use of unconventional instruments and extended techniques remains present, but the orchestral palette is expanded to accommodate the film's broader scope and more varied dramatic requirements. The result is a score that feels unmistakably part of the Conjuring musical universe while serving the specific needs of this particular story. The composer's collaboration with director Michael Chaves proved crucial in developing a musical approach that would support the film's unique blend of horror, thriller, and supernatural romance elements. Chaves' vision for the film's tone and pacing informed Bashar's compositional choices, ensuring that the music would effectively serve the director's intended dramatic effects while maintaining the supernatural atmosphere that audiences expected from a Conjuring film. The integration of Bashar's score with the film's sound design required careful coordination during post-production. The Conjuring films have always relied on the interplay between musical score and supernatural sound effects to create their distinctive atmospheric effects, and this collaboration became even more important given the third film's expanded supernatural scope and more complex audio requirements. Released theatrical. The theatrical release of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It became a strategically complex and historically significant event that reflected both the ongoing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the film industry and Warner Bros.' innovative approach to simultaneous theatrical and streaming distribution. Originally slated for a September 2020 release, the film was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This delay represented just the beginning of what would become a complicated journey to theatrical release. It was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on theaters and the film industry, after previously being scheduled to be released on September 11, 2020. The original September 2020 release date had been strategically chosen to position the film during the fall movie season, traditionally a strong period for horror films as audiences seek appropriate entertainment leading up to Halloween. This timing would have allowed the film to capitalize on seasonal audience interest while avoiding the more competitive summer blockbuster season and the awards-focused late fall period. However, the pandemic's unprecedented impact on global cinema operations made this original timeline impossible to maintain. Theater closures, capacity restrictions, and widespread audience reluctance to return to cinema environments created an entirely new set of challenges for theatrical releases. Studios worldwide were forced to grapple with fundamental questions about the viability of traditional theatrical distribution during a period of dramatic market disruption. Warner Bros.' response to these challenges proved both innovative and controversial within the industry. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It was released in the United Kingdom on May 26, 2021, and in the United States on June 4, 2021, distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures and New Line Cinema. However, the theatrical release strategy represented only part of Warner Bros.' comprehensive distribution approach. In the United States, as part of its plans for all of its 2021 films, Warner Bros. Also released The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It simultaneously on the HBO Max streaming service for a period of 1 month, after which the film was removed from the service until the normal home media release schedule period. This simultaneous release strategy marked a fundamental departure from traditional theatrical windows, which typically required several months of exclusive theatrical exhibition before films became available for home viewing. The decision to implement day-and-date theatrical and streaming release represented a calculated risk that balanced multiple competing interests. For the studio, it provided a hedge against the uncertainties of pandemic-era theatrical performance while potentially driving subscriptions to HBO Max. For audiences, it offered increased accessibility and viewing options during a period when many remained uncomfortable with theatrical experiences. For exhibitors, however, it represented a significant challenge to the traditional value proposition that had driven audiences to cinemas. The theatrical presentation maintained the high technical standards expected of a major horror release, with careful attention to sound design and visual presentation that would maximize the effectiveness of the supernatural elements and cinema environments. The Conjuring films had always benefited significantly from theatrical presentation, as the shared audience experience and superior audio systems available in cinemas enhanced the effectiveness of carefully crafted scares and atmospheric tension. Marketing the film during the pandemic period required significant adaptations to traditional promotional strategies. Premiere events, extensive media tours, and other conventional promotional activities had to be reimagined to account for social distancing requirements and travel restrictions that remained in effect in many regions. The marketing team developed innovative digital promotional strategies while working to maintain the excitement and anticipation that had traditionally surrounded Conjuring film releases. Despite the challenging circumstances, the film achieved notable theatrical success within the context of pandemic-era releases. The opening weekend performance provided particularly encouraging results, demonstrating that the Conjuring franchise retained its ability to drive audience interest and generate significant theatrical business even under unprecedented circumstances. Theater chains and exhibitors had complex reactions to Warner Bros.' simultaneous streaming release strategy. While the unique circumstances of the pandemic period meant that exhibitors were generally willing to accept modified distribution models as necessary adaptations to extraordinary situations, the long-term implications of day-and-date releasing remained a subject of ongoing industry discussion and concern. The international release pattern allowed Warner Bros. To evaluate audience response and box office performance across different markets while building momentum for broader global release. The staggered international rollout provided valuable data about regional variations in audience behavior and theatrical recovery, informing both immediate release strategies and longer-term distribution planning. Home media. The home media release strategy for The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It represented both traditional distribution methods and innovative streaming approaches that reflected the rapidly evolving entertainment landscape during the pandemic period. Warner Bros.' comprehensive approach to home media availability became a significant case study in adapting distribution strategies to serve diverse audience preferences and technological platforms while maximizing revenue across multiple viewing channels. In the United States, as part of its plans for all of its 2021 films, Warner Bros. Also released The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It simultaneously on the HBO Max streaming service for a period of 1 month, after which the film was removed from the service until the normal home media release schedule period. This initial streaming availability represented a dramatic departure from traditional home media windows, which typically required several months between theatrical and home availability. The HBO Max release provided subscribers with immediate access to high-definition presentation with superior audio quality, creating a home viewing experience that approached theatrical quality for audiences with appropriate equipment. The streaming presentation maintained the film's original aspect ratio and audio mix, ensuring that the carefully crafted supernatural atmosphere would translate effectively to home viewing environments. This technical attention was particularly important for a horror film where audio design and visual precision contribute significantly to the effectiveness of supernatural scares. Following its opening weekend, Samba TV reported the film was streamed in 1.6 million American households over its first 3 days of release. These viewership numbers represented substantial initial interest in the streaming format, demonstrating significant audience appetite for immediate home access to major franchise releases. It was watched in 3 million households over the first 17 days. The continued growth in viewership indicated sustained audience interest and positive word-of-mouth recommendations. The film was watched in over 3 million U.S. households by the end of its first 30 days of release. These streaming performance metrics provided Warner Bros. With valuable data about audience viewing preferences and consumption patterns, informing both immediate release strategies and longer-term distribution planning for future franchise installments and other major releases. The one-month HBO Max availability period created a strategic balance between the studio's desire to drive streaming subscriptions and the need to maintain the long-term value of the property across multiple distribution channels. After the initial month-long period, the film was removed from HBO Max, creating scarcity that would support traditional home media sales while building anticipation for the film's eventual return to streaming platforms. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It was released on digital HD on July 23, 2021, and was released on DVD, Blu-ray, and Ultra HD Blu-ray by Warner Bros. Home Entertainment on August 24, 2021, under the title The Conjuring 3. The Devil Made Me Do It. The traditional digital and physical media release followed a more conventional timeline, providing audiences with purchase and rental options through various online platforms and physical media formats. The digital release through platforms including iTunes, Amazon Prime Video, Google Play, and Vudu offered audiences the flexibility to own or rent the film through their preferred digital ecosystem. The digital presentation typically provides the highest quality home viewing experience, with options for 4K Ultra HD presentation and immersive audio formats that can effectively reproduce the film's sophisticated supernatural audio design. The physical media release provided the comprehensive home entertainment experience that dedicated fans and collectors have come to expect from major franchise releases. The Ultra HD Blu-ray edition offered 4K resolution with HDR color enhancement and immersive audio formats including Dolby Atmos. Technical specifications that were particularly important for a horror film where visual detail and audio precision contribute significantly to atmospheric effectiveness. Physical media releases traditionally include extensive bonus features, behind-the-scenes materials, and commentary tracks that provide fans with deeper insight into the production process and creative decisions. These supplementary materials serve both entertainment and educational purposes, allowing audiences to understand the complex collaborative process involved in creating effective supernatural horror while building deeper connection to the franchise mythology. The film was re-added to HBO Max on October 21, 2021. The return to HBO Max coincided strategically with the Halloween season, providing the streaming platform with appropriate horror content during a period of peak audience interest in supernatural entertainment. This timing demonstrated Warner Bros.' sophisticated approach to maximizing content value across different seasonal periods and audience consumption patterns. The comprehensive home media strategy included international availability across various platforms and formats, with release schedules adapted to serve different regional markets and their specific technical standards and consumer preferences. This global approach ensured that the Conjuring franchise maintained its international audience engagement across all distribution channels while accounting for regional variations in technology adoption and viewing habits. The success of the film's multi-platform home media strategy provided valuable insights for Warner Bros. And other major studios about the evolving relationships between theatrical, streaming, and traditional home media distribution. The ability to serve audiences across multiple viewing preferences simultaneously while maintaining revenue streams across different distribution windows represented an important evolution in entertainment industry practices. Reception box office. The box office performance of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It must be evaluated within the extraordinary context of pandemic-era theatrical releases, where traditional performance metrics and industry expectations required fundamental recalibration due to dramatically altered market conditions worldwide. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It grossed $65.6 million in the United States and Canada, and $140.8 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $206.4 million, against a production budget of $39 million. This worldwide performance represented a healthy profit margin that exceeded many industry predictions for pandemic-era releases. The financial success demonstrated both the enduring commercial appeal of the Conjuring franchise and the adaptability of horror films to challenging market conditions, as the genre's dedicated audience base proved willing to seek out theatrical experiences even during periods of ongoing public health concerns. The domestic performance, while representing the lowest domestic gross for a mainline Conjuring film, achieved respectable success under unprecedented circumstances. The $65.6 million domestic total reflected several complex factors, including reduced theater capacity due to health protocols, widespread audience reluctance to return to cinema environments, the simultaneous availability on HBO Max, and general disruption to traditional movie-going patterns that characterized the entire pandemic period. In the United States, the film was released alongside Spirit Untamed and was projected to gross $15 to $20 million from 3,100 theaters in its opening weekend. These initial industry projections reflected the cautious optimism that characterized pandemic-era box office predictions. Acknowledging both the franchise's proven appeal and the unprecedented uncertainty surrounding theatrical performance during this period, the film made $9.8 million on its first day, increasing estimates to $25 to $27 million. The strong Friday performance exceeded initial expectations and suggested robust audience interest that translated into concrete theatrical attendance despite Review.1 with the latest chapter of the Conjuring universe, The Nun, proving to be another solid hit for Warner Bros. At the box office, and taking the series beyond a combined $1.4 billion at the worldwide box office. Producer Peter Safran and writer Gary Dauberman have been providing an update on several planned future installments in the horror franchise. Firstly, speaking to Cinema Blend, Safran has said that The Conjuring 3 is actually coming along great. David Leslie Johnson is working on the screenplay, and I feel pretty confident they will have that one up and running next year. Before we get to The Conjuring 3, there's a third Annabelle movie to look forward to on July 3, 2019. And Dauberman, who will also be making his directorial debut on the film, has offered a few details on the plot and where it fits in the Conjuring timeline. This is the Warrens picking up where they bring Annabelle home after we see that in The Conjuring. After they visit the nurse's apartment, it happens a little while after that, so they bring it home and they're aware of the doll's evil, and sort of worry about her presence among the other artifacts. So before Conjuring 2, after the beginning of Conjuring, Dauberman also spoke briefly about another announced spin-off in The Crooked Man, stating that, "We're still working on the script for it. The bar is set very high for the movies that we want to make in the Conjuring universe, and until we get to that place we're not interested in putting one of these out there into the universe." When a young nun at a cloistered abbey in Romania takes her own life, a priest with a haunted past and a novitiate on the threshold of her final vows are sent by the Vatican to investigate. Together they uncover the order's unholy secret. Risking not only their lives but their faith and their very souls, they confront the malevolent force in the form of the same demonic nun that first terrorized audiences in The Conjuring 2, as the abbey becomes a horrific battleground between the living and the damned. The nun stars Oscar-nominated Demian Bichir, A Better Life, as Father Burke, Tessa Farmiga, American Horror Story, as Sister Irene, Jonas Bloquet, as local villager Frenchie, Charlotte Hope, Game of Thrones, as the Abbey's Sister Victoria, Ingrid Bisu, Tony Erdmann, as Sister Ona, and Bonnie Aarons, reprising her Conjuring 2 role as Valak. Review.2 The Conjuring universe has been expanding rapidly since James Wan kicked things off with the 2013 original. And now Patrick Wilson's Ed Warren and Vera Farmiga's Lorraine Warren are back with a third main film, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and there's a first look at the latest entry online in a featurette about the various arms of the franchise, with Michael Chaves in the director's chair. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It reveals a chilling story of terror, Murder and unknown evil that shocked even experienced real-life paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. One of the most sensational cases from their files. It starts with a fight for the soul of a young boy, then takes them beyond anything they'd ever seen before, to mark the first time in U.S. history that a murder suspect would claim demonic possession as defense. This new featurette is largely Wan and his cast and various crews talking up the vision behind the film and the appeal of the genre, including the various spin-offs spawned in the shape of the Annabelle movies, The Nun and more. We're fairly certain a trailer will follow soon, but The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It will itself be out on 4th of June next year. Just so you know, we may receive a commission or other compensation from the links on this website. Read why you should trust your review. 3 The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It is now in theaters and on HBO Max. The Conjuring 3 is loosely based on the 1981 trial of 19-year-old Arne Cheyenne Johnson in real life. Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter of his landlord. An unnerving scene involving an evil waterbed and a traumatized child might seem like a pretty unreal occurrence, but in the freaky real-life history that fuels the Conjuring horror movie universe, it's not that big a swing. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, in theaters and on HBO Max Friday, is the third film to star Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as real-life married paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, and the new chapter digs into a famously high-profile case, the 1981 trial of 19-year-old Arne Cheyenne Johnson, the first person to use demonic possession as a murder defense. The Devil doesn't leave much time for courtroom drama, instead focusing on the Warrens' twisty quest for clues to help Arne, played by Rory O'Connor, who's inhabited by a dark force after it hops out of the body of 11-year-old David Glatzel, Julian Hillyard, during an exorcism. In real life, Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter of his landlord and served 5 years of a 10 to 20-year sentence. The fun thing about these movies is you're always playing this fun game of, well, what was true? How extraordinary did it get? Says Devil director Michael Chaves. He grew up Catholic, yet in making the movie, it's like my own faith was in question. If you choose to believe Arne and his story, it really has consequence and weight, because we're talking about a real victim and a real murder. Chaves admits that, while the story is based on a real case, court records and interviews, certain liberties were taken to craft the movie version. He talks to USA Today about how he balanced telling the story right versus making an entertaining horror thriller. The Devil Made Me Do It conjured a more torturous exorcism. The movie starts off with the Warrens and a priest trying to drive the evil spirit out of David's body. According to Chaves, there are no photographs from the actual exorcism, but multiple witnesses said that David levitated. Audiences have seen that in a lot of exorcism movies, so we wanted to really put them back on their heels. Chaves says, he opted for a sequence where David is bone-crackingly turned into a human pretzel. When you see levitation, there's something magical about that, Chaves says, but seeing a little child going through these contortions and essentially being physically tortured was much more unsettling. Director Michael Chaves treated the murder scene with proper respect. In the new Conjuring installment, Arne is found covered in blood and walking aimlessly down the road by police after the fatal incident with his landlord. That story beat is true, but the trippy, haunting and visceral murder sequence in the movie is a fabrication because the real Johnson blacked out and has no memory of it. Obviously, something was going on with Arne, Chaves says. Maybe it was a demon. Maybe there was something else. This is really an extraordinary event in his life, and so you have to kind of imagine that something had put him in a headspace, which he detached from reality. The Conjuring 3 makes hay with curse claims. In a flashback during the fictional Warrens' investigation, they find out David's first encounter with the supernatural occurred in a bedroom where the boy was taking a rest on a waterbed. David was then attacked by a demonic arm ripping out of the watery comfort, and the paranormal couple later discover a cursed witch's totem buried underneath the floorboard. In real life, there was no flotational fright, but after the Glatzels moved into a rental property, Chaves says David reported having a traumatic encounter in a room with an unexplained burn stain through his mattress and onto the floor below. The real Glatzels also found carvings in the surrounding woods they interpreted as demonic or pagan in origin. In his film, Chaves wanted to tape into the dawn of the satanic panic in the early 80s, maybe the Glatzels were cursed, or maybe they were just picking up on this growing paranoia and fear that really was sweeping the country. Ed Warren did have a heart attack, just not on this case. In the aftermath of the movie's opening exorcism, Ed has a medical issue and is rushed to the hospital. Chaves reports the real demonologist actually had multiple heart attacks in the 1980s, including a debilitating one that put him in a wheelchair for months. In Conjuring, his ailment is used as a device to shift the narrative toward Lorraine's real-life work with police as a psychic. Lorraine Warren helped on missing person cases and a variety of others in the 80s, and in 1989, the Department of Justice issued a handbook on how to work with psychics and clairvoyants. It was something where she became so famous and also notorious, Chaves says. Up to this point in the Conjuring movies, we'd never really had a chance to dig into that because they're haunted house movies. Sadly, no lawyers met. Annabelle Arne's defense attorney in the film is unsurprisingly reluctant about using demonic possession as a legal strategy. To help convince her, the Warrens invite her to come over for a dinner and see Annabelle at the infamous doll that resides in the couple's special room of unholy artifacts, and the fan-favorite star of 3 Conjuring spin-off movies. The very next scene finds the lawyer in the courtroom, looking like she just witnessed a ghost, and all in for the unusual defense. Chaves confirms that was a nod to the bigger Conjuring universe and not exactly what happened. That said, innocent by reason of the supernatural was definitely a big, bold claim. Any lawyer who takes that to a court, they're putting their career on the line. They had to be presented with some kind of evidence, whether it was Arne's or something the Warrens were providing. As for Annabelle, she had to make a cameo, even if it wasn't actually in person. Chaves adds, the idea of her looms pretty large. Review. 5 Casting really good actors as the leads has paid endless dividends in the Conjuring films, and with every subtle, emotional gesture or realistic depiction of terror or shock, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson make that as true in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, the third film featuring these two as Lorraine and Ed Warren. But the movie, it's the worst of the trilogy, beginning and ending as an over-the-top blunt instrument, pounding home the opening act exorcism and middling finale with breathless editing and a soundtrack amplified into a sledgehammer. The sagging middle acts are where the Warrens set out to prove a young man accused of murder, Rory O'Connor of Teen Spirit and TV's The Spanish Princess, was possessed at the time he committed the crime. They were at the exorcism in which they witnessed a child, Julian Hillyard, turned into a pretzel with the voice that came out of Linda Blair in The Exorcist. They heard the deal young Arne O'Connor made with a demon to take me instead and spare his girlfriends, Sir Catherine Hook, little brother. So naturally, the Warrens are interested in his case. Accused of stabbing a man 22 times after being subjected to Blondie's Call Me at 140 decibels by his girlfriend's beer-drunk boss, the Warrens convince a skeptical lawyer of the demonic possession defense after inviting her over and introducing her to Annabelle. The funniest line in the movie, a moment embracing the Conjuring universe but doing it off-camera. There are bravura bits, great effects in which Lorraine dives into Sir mode, re-witnessing crimes as the Warrens tried to tie Arne's case to Satanist activity in an era when that hit the headlines every few days in assorted corners of rural America. Clever effects sell those moments as much as Farmiga's performance, as committed as she's been in all of those movies. Adding the always creepy John Noble, Lord of the Rings, etc., as the old priest who knows things is a nice touch, but the payoff is as conventional as it is uninspiring. The best of these movies have moved me to tears in their coda. This one was a big fat meh. Those otherwise lumbering middle acts are where Devil Made Me Do It lost me, and having Farmiga assert Ed and I have proven demonic possession dozens of times is a shovelful I could have done without. These movies, with their clips of the real Warrens interviewed by the chat hosts of the era, Phil Donahue and Tom Snyder were always booking them, and real case coverage in newsprint, are pointlessly passing off their balderdash as a true story, as some great fond of occult insights and knowledge succeeding generations have merely forgotten. Nostradamus built an entire posthumous career over what he knew that we have forgotten. stay through the credits. This version of the Warrens is rightly described as characters created by screenwriters. The real couple shared chat showtime with aliens, built the pyramids, crank Eric Von Däniken, soothsayer Gene Dixon, and spoon-bending hustler mentalist Uri Geller, suggesting they proved anything as rewriting their history and turning passable entertainments into fake news. Why not have Wilson tag the movies with "We depict, you decide"? An inside joke that properly IDs much of what we've just been shown as BS. Of course, if Michael Chaves, he directed The Curse of La Llorona, weakest screen version of La Llorona, was closer to horror's A-list and The Devil Made Me Do It had delivered, none of that would have mattered much. MPA rating, R for terror, violence and some disturbing images. Cast: Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, Rory O'Connor, John Noble, and Sarah Catherine Hook. Review. 6 The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It cast, characters, and real-life comparison guide. All of the films in the Conjuring universe have been based on paranormal case files that Ed and Lorraine Warren have investigated in their heyday. However, the circumstances surrounding The Devil Made Me Do It are different to the usual hauntings the previous two installments have tackled. With The Conjuring 3 being based on a murder case, the Warrens are joined by other characters who have real-life counterparts. The sequel sees Ed and Lorraine called upon to investigate the demonic possession of Mark Rowe as Sergeant Thomas E. David Glatzel. But things quickly take a turn when an exorcism sees Aaron Cheyenne Johnson become possessed, later stabbing his landlord to death and pleading not guilty with a defense that stated the devil made him do it. Set in 1981, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It sees the return of some familiar faces, as well as several new characters as the demonologists tackle not one, but two cases. The horror film has a pretty large cast and they each have an important role to play. Here is every major and supporting character, who they are, what other projects the cast has been in, and what, if applicable, their real-life counterparts look like by comparison. Patrick Wilson as Ed Warren. Ed Warren is a demonologist who specialized in paranormal investigations. He and his wife allegedly investigated 10,000 cases, including the ones at the center of the Conjuring movies. Ed was indeed a part of the case that alleged Aaron Johnson was possessed by a demon when he murdered his landlord. Alongside his wife, he found the New England Society for Psychic Research in 1952, which investigated hauntings. Ed passed away in 2006. Patrick Wilson has a long and storied career. In addition to portraying Ed in the Conjuring films, the actor has starred in several movies like Watchmen, Insidious, Aquaman, Stretch, Prometheus, The Phantom of the Opera, and more. He also appeared in 10 episodes of the TV show Fargo. Vera Farmiga as Lorraine Warren. Lorraine Warren is also a demonologist and self-proclaimed clairvoyant who is able to sense things about people and objects to weave together what happened. Together with her husband, Lorraine was called upon to investigate thousands of cases. She died in 2019 at the age of 92. In The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, she is able to figure out the details of two different cases, one of which involved a murder and suicide of two teenagers, one of whom was possessed. In this film, Lorraine establishes a two-way connection with the occultist, which puts her life in danger. Vera Farmiga is perhaps most notable for her role in the series Bates Motel. She was also in The Departed, Up in the Air, Source Code, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and When They See Us. Farmiga's next role will be as Eleanor Bishop in Marvel's Disney Plus series Hawkeye. Rory O'Connor as Aaron Cheyenne Johnson. Aaron Cheyenne Johnson was actually convicted of the crime he's shown committing in the film. He worked with the tree service and lived with his girlfriend Debbie Glatzel above the kennel where she worked. After killing his and Debbie's landlord, Aaron claimed demonic possession as defense in his trial, which is also what is shown in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. In real life, Aaron was charged with first-degree manslaughter and sentenced to up to 20 years in prison, of which he served 5. Rory O'Connor is known for Teen Spirit, The Postcard Killings, The Spanish Princess, and the Apple TV Plus series The Morning Show. Sarah Catherine Hook as Debbie Glatzel. Debbie is Aaron's girlfriend and the sister of David Glatzel. She works at the kennel and was present throughout David's exorcism, Aaron's killing of Bruno, whose real name was changed for the film, and his subsequent trial. The film stays true to Debbie's role in the story. In real life, Debbie marries Arn 1 year before he gets out of prison, and she stands by her account of what happened and the Warrens' account of demonic possession. Sarah Catherine Hook starred in Monsterland, the TV series The Valley, and Law Order, Special Victims Unit. Julian Hillyard as David Glatzel. David Glatzel is the initial subject of demonic possession in the film before the story pivots to Arn. David is Debbie's kid brother who is looking forward to Arn asking his sister to marry him. In this film, David becomes possessed after moving into the Glatzel's new home, and he starts convulsing and attacking others. In real life, claims suggest David saw visions of an old man who also transformed into a demonic creature, with the Warrens suggesting he actually levitated during this time. Julian Hillyard's most prominent role outside of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, was as Billy Maximoff in WandaVision. The young actor also starred in The Haunting of Hill House and Penny Dreadful, City of Angels. John Noble as Castner. Castner was formerly a priest who studied and researched the occult before leaving it behind to retire. He helps Ed and Lorraine in their quest to discover more about the witch's totem they find beneath the Glatzel's home. What they ultimately discover is that Castner is much closer to the case than he was letting on. John Noble famously played Dr. Walter Bishop in the series Fringe. He has also starred in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Sleepy Hollow, Legends of Tomorrow, and Elementary. He most recently played Butcher's father in The Boys. Eugenie Bondurant as the occultist. The occultist, whose name is Isla, is the primary antagonist of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. She's behind the seemingly demonic possessions that are the focus of the film, and her backstory unfolds as she forges a connection with Lorraine and tries to get her and Ed out of the way to continue her work with the occult. Eugenie Bondurant is known for playing Tigress in The Hunger Games, Mockingjay, Part 2. She has also appeared in the reboot series MacGyver and Sis, New Orleans. The Conjuring 3 supporting cast characters. Shannon Cook as Drew Thomas. Drew Thomas has been working with the Warrens for several years by the time of The Conjuring 3's events. He films exorcisms and aids the Warrens in their paranormal research dating back to 2013's The Conjuring. Shannon Cook has starred in the CW's The 100 and Nancy Drew, Degrassi, Next Generation, Dark Places, and Baxter. Ronnie Jean Blevins as Bruno Sauls. Bruno Sauls is the landlord and Debbie Glatzel's boss at the dog kennel who is killed by Aaron Johnson. Bruno's real-life counterpart, whose name is actually Alan Bono, is the only person whose name was changed for the film. Ronnie Jean Blevins has appeared in TV series like Lucifer, the reboot of MacGyver, True Detective, Bones, and Westworld. He's also been in the action film Death in Texas, The Neighbor, and The Wave with Justin Long. Steve Coulter as Father Gordon. Father Gordon is the Warren's spiritual advisor and a liaison who communicates with the Vatican on their behalf. Steve Coulter has been in other Conjuring movies, including the first 2 films and Annabelle Comes Home. He has also had roles in The Walking Dead, Watchmen, Yellowstone, P-Valley, and played Prince Charles in the TV movie Harry Meghan, A Royal Romance. Vince Pisani as Father Newman. Father Newman was called upon to exorcise David and was also there in the early stages following Arn's arrest. He almost appointed the Warrens to Father Castner for help with the occult. Vince Pisani has been in Jumanji, The Next Level, Stuber, and The Gifted. Keith Arthur Bolden as Sergeant Clay. Sergeant Clay is investigating the disappearance of Jessica Louise Strong, and the Warrens aid him in finding out what happened to her in exchange for information about the totem. He doesn't buy into Lorraine's clairvoyance, but he's willing to come along. Keith Arthur Bolden has appeared in Cobra Kai, Lovecraft Country, Black Lightning, The Haunting of Hill House, and Mile 22. Ingrid Bisu as Jessica Louise Strong. Jessica Louise Strong is the disappeared teenager whose case Sergeant Clay is investigating. As it turns out, her case is tied to the occultist, and it's up to the Warrens to figure out what really happened to her and how sinister it is. Ingrid Bisu is no stranger to the Conjuring universe, having previously starred in The Nun. Bisu has also had roles in Roxanne and Tony Erdmann. Andrea Andrit as Kata Lincoln. Kata Lincoln is Jessica's best friend who was killed just before Jessica's disappearance. The events leading up to her death are still a mystery, which is why Sergeant Clay is stumped. Andrea Andrit has had various guest starring roles in TV shows like Cobra Kai, Doom Patrol, Ozark, American Soul, and the film Active Shooter. Andrit is following up The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It with the Tomorrow War, which stars Chris Pratt, Yvonne Strahovski, and J.K. Simmons. Ashley LaCon Campbell as Meryl. Meryl is Aaron Cheyenne Johnson's attorney who initially doesn't believe his Devil Made Me Do It defense would hold up in court because of a lack of evidence. In real life, Johnson's lawyer's name was Martin Minella, who played up the case by claiming it was scarier than The Exorcist. Ashley LaCon Campbell has been in other notable horror films like Get Out and Scary Movie V. She has also appeared in Ambitions, Drop Dead Diva, The Blind Side, and One Night in Miami. A Broken Bar. Sterling Gerrans as Judy Warren. Judy is Ed and Lorraine's daughter, who was all grown up in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. While she had a slightly bigger role in previous films, specifically in The Conjuring, Judy only appears in 1 or 2 scenes at the most while Ed is recovering from his heart attack in the hospital. Sterling Gerrans appeared in World War Z, Dark Places, and No Escape. Gerrans also stars in the TV series Divorce. Mitchell Hugh as young Ed Warren and Megan Ashley Brown as young Lorraine Warren. Young Lorraine and young Ed appear in flashbacks a few times throughout the film. The flashbacks offer brief details to Ed and Lorraine's first meeting and date when they were in their late teens. Mitchell Hugh is known best for playing Mac Morris in the Saved by the Bell reboot and has also appeared in Roswell, New Mexico and Harriet. Megan Ashley Brown has appeared in Party of Five, TNT's Animal Kingdom, and Syfy's Future, cult classic. Paul Wilson as Carl Glatzel. Carl Glatzel is David and Debbie's father who, while seen throughout the early parts of the film, doesn't play a large role in the events following the exorcism. Paul Wilson is most notable for his role in the indie film Big Stone Gap, starring Ashley Judd and Patrick Wilson. Other roles include By the Grace of Bob and the sci-fi film Skyman. Charlene Amoya as Judy Glatzel. Judy Glatzel is Debbie and David's mother whose role, like Carl's, is limited in the film beyond the first act. In real life, Judy and Carl had another child, Carl Jr., who was older than David, but doesn't appear in the film. Charlene Amoya has guest starred in several TV series, including Grey's Anatomy, The Resident, The Flash, and How I Met Your Mother, where she played Wendy the waitress for several episodes. The actress has also been in Birds of Prey and American Reunion. Mark Rowe as Sergeant Thomas. Sergeant Thomas is yet another police officer investigating the case. Mark Rowe has had roles in Black Lightning, Ray Donovan, Yellowstone, The Resident, Bluff City Law, Modern Family, and Where the Bears Are. Chris Green as Cop. He is the officer who finds Aaron walking down the street after he kills Bruno and arrests him. Chris Green has had roles in Atlanta, Loving, 2016's The Birth of a Nation, The Founder, and The Vampire Diaries. Lindsay Liff as Judge. The judge presided over Aaron Johnson's hearing in court. In real life, the judge was Robert Callahan, who rejected Aaron's defense that the devil made him do it. In addition to being in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Lindsay Liff is known for Ozark, Trial by Fire, Just Mercy, where he also played a judge, and Dumb and Dumber 2.